Okay, now as we come back to this, I want to look in a broad term as to what the genealogical method looks like, and then we'll apply it specifically to some of the terminologies. Now, as I say, there are two broad views, many subsets and little tweaks here, but I think if we can get the broad picture, that'll do us good. Both of these views have the same objective. All right, they both have exactly the same objective: to get back to the original, based upon different presuppositions. If I accept, all right, I'll make this statement. If I accept the presuppositions of the genealogical method, it works. It makes sense. I don't accept the presuppositions, right? I don't accept the presuppositions. But if those presuppositions are accepted, then the procedure for the genealogical method is most logical. My presupposition is going to be different. Now, the genealogical method is based upon one assumption and one speculation. All right, it's based upon one assumption and one speculation, and we'll set those up here in just a moment. But the basic idea is that all extant manuscripts are related to early families through various generations of copying. The families of manuscripts, the recensions, part of our set of terms that we talked about yesterday. Families, hence the genealogical idea here, right? The idea that all extant Greek manuscripts are related to early families through various generations of copying. And in this way, the witnesses then to the text is combined into various text types. All right, so we come, all right, here's the original. And let's say from the original we had copy A and copy B. All right, so here, and we know the copying process indeed takes place. And now that we have copy A and copy B, we have somebody C copying A. All right, he copies A, and somebody D copies B. So now I have a copy. Start with a copy of the original. Now I have a copy of a copy. And let's say then that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that copied from C. So I have all of those pieces of evidence. Now then, let's say I'm looking at all of these things. I have now in my possession all of this material, and I have all of that data as well. And I start looking at those manuscripts. I start collating them, comparing them. And I learn that I have two readings. I have a reading X at a particular point and a reading Y. And it appears from the evidence that Y is represented only in manuscripts B and D. And manuscript or reading X rather, is represented by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, whatever it was. X has that whole massive. Now, it would appear objectively that it's 9 or whatever it was there against 2. It's 9 against 2. But in the genealogical method, the assumption is, and here's the little rubric, here's the assumption, that community of reading, okay, community of reading, commonality of reading, suggests community or commonality of origin. That's the assumption. All right, I said the genealogical method is based upon one assumption. Here is the assumption that community, and you understand how I'm using the word community here, community of reading suggests community of origin. So, the fact that these all have X simply says they all came from the same place. All right? They're all been in that family. They all come from the same place. So instead then of having witnesses 8 or 9, whatever that was, against 2, in essence I have 1 against 1. All right? And so it reduces the number of witnesses into a single family because of the community of reading suggesting the community of origin. Now, there's a sense in which that makes sense, all right? A sense in which that makes sense. You know, there's an old teacher joke that teacher gave a test, and as he's giving the test, he observes and he's confident, right? He's confident that one guy is copying, cheating. Sees it happening, right? And gets the papers. He gets the papers, and after the guy denied, because students always deny, all right? They always deny. But he gets the papers, and he starts comparing the two papers. And every time this paper got one right, the other got it right. He got it wrong, the other paper got it wrong. Coincidence. Come to one question here, and this paper says, I don't know. And the other paper says, I don't know either. All right. All right. Teacher joke. All right, but what does that prove? All right, that proves community of reading, all right, suggests community of origin. All right, because obviously he got that from the other. So that is the assumption. All right, that is the assumption of the genealogical method. That even though I've got all of these witnesses, they are related one to the other because they're saying the same thing here in this particular regard. So it's not really independent witnesses. It is a single witness. Now, in this way, the genealogical method reduces the overwhelming weight of manuscript evidence into single text types. All right? It reduces the whole amount of witnesses into single text types. Now, this went through much evolution. All right, much evolution. The genealogical method, in terms of its popularization, is typically associated with Westcott, yeah, that's an O, with Westcott and Hort. All right, we often talk about the Westcott and Hort text, the Westcott and Hort theory. And many who will hold West, the T there, Westcott. Many who hold or who are opposed to the Westcott and Hort theory begin to attack Westcott and Hort, and particularly Hort. All right? They're Anglicans, sure enough, but so's Bergen. All right? Hort was a rascal in some ways. Apparently he had some marital affairs and found, and I don't justify it, all right? Very well a rascal. But having said that, has nothing to do, all right, has nothing to do with this textual theory, all right? And so it really does no good. It does no good to have a character assassination of Westcott or Hort as a means of, now you can do that if you like, but keep it within the framework of morality and whatever else. Don't use that as an argument against the textual theory. Whether we like it or not, Westcott and Hort did not write any of these manuscripts, right? They did not write, they didn't construct, they didn't compose any of these manuscripts. So the variants that are occurring here did not originate with them. You would think it would when you hear some of the arguments that are raised against it. So yeah, I don't justify them. I don't like their theology, although Westcott's commentary on Hebrews is a standard for almost everybody. Rascals. All right, so let's put it on the table. Westcott and Hort had personal problems. All right, they had personal problems, and that's a whole separate issue. So now that we at least admit that, let's go and realize that if you argue, and here's the thing, I want to maintain the use of the majority text. All right, but if my argument for the majority text is based upon looking at Hort's love letters or whatever else, you see, what does that do? What does that do? It doesn't strengthen the argument. Again, apart from my little following, who, you see, they're going to look at that and say, you're weird. You're an idiot, right? Yeah, that's what they say. We can handle the text and the theory looking at it objectively, all right? So do what you want with Westcott and Hort, but their personal character is not the issue. Their methodology, I think, is skewed. But there are those that hold to their methodology, that buy into that proposition, that believe in inspiration as much as I do. All right? That believe in the authority of God's Word as much as I do. I can't impugn them and I can't undermine them saying, you don't believe in inspiration. They do. You don't believe in preservation. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. But they have a different approach. Is it a matter of doctrine? No, they believe in preservation. They believe in inspiration. But a different mindset, a different acceptance of a presupposition. So I want to look at it objectively. Can we do this from a objective perspective, a logical perspective, and still come up with the same conclusion? All right, now, Westcott and Hort, they're living here at the latter part of the 19th century. All these manuscripts are coming. They're coming to light. What do we do with them? Do we just throw them and say, no, I don't want to see it, I don't want to see it? Faith is never afraid of evidence. Look at the evidence. Now, when they looked at this, they began to, and they weren't the originators. All right, I want to make it clear. Westcott and Hort were not the originators of the genealogical method. They kind of came at the tail end. Their name is associated with the popular representation of it, kind of like the Wellhausen documentary theory. Wellhausen gets credit for all of that stuff. He's at the end. He popularized it. All right, a lot of stuff going on leading up to Valhalla. A lot of stuff going on that I'm not going to deal with at this point, just theory. Westcott and Hort, looking at this with this assumption that community of reading suggests community of origin, identified 4 different family groups. All right, they identified 4 different family groups, 4 different family texts, recensions. The first one they called neutral. All right, they called neutral, which they assumed to be the closest to the original. All right, they assumed that the neutral text was the closest to the original. Now, that was a judgment on their part. And the very fact that it was called neutral kind of demonstrates their bias, all right, toward that particular family. Then the Alexandrian. The Alexandrian manuscripts, a branch, they saw this as a branch of the neutral, identifying the Alexandrian really as a scholarly revision of the neutral, but related in that way. Then what they called the Western text. Yeah, the Western text. The Western text, so named because of the location in the West of the majority of the manuscripts that were discovered here. And it had certain affinities, characterized by conflations and whatever, but they were able to group it into that particular category. And then finally what they called the Syrian text. And the Syrian text, what they identified as the Syrian text, had the bulk, the majority of the actual Greek manuscripts. The vast majority of extant manuscripts were in this category here, in this family here. But even though we have the massive amount of witnesses that would fall within this category, it's reduced. All right, you can see what happens. Here's the most of the evidence, but it's reduced to a single family. To a single family. They argued that witnesses are to be weighed and not counted. All right, that was one of their rubrics here. Witnesses are to be weighed for their significance, not counted for their number. And the fact that these can be counted and the vast majority are here, that's not the issue. Let's weigh them. Let's weigh them. Where's the significance? Where's the importance? Now, they viewed the Syrian. Here's why they reduced the weight. I said a moment ago, or in the last segment, that the genealogical theory is based upon one assumption and one speculation. All right? The assumption is community of reading suggests community of origin. That's the assumption. Here's the speculation. Westcott and Hort argued that the Syrian text was inferior, identifying it as an officially produced revision by Lucian. All right, you know Lucian. Have you heard of Lucian? Sure. Scholar in Antioch, school in Antioch. They identified the Syrian text as an official revision by Lucian somewhere between 312 and 350. And they claimed that Lucian, in this official revision of the text, used the other 3 text families as the basis of that revision. Supposedly taking place in Antioch. Now, can you see the implications of that? The argument is, statement is, that under Lucian, somewhere between 312 and 350, church, commission, whatever, revises the text, standardizes the text. All right, remember in the Hebrew there's Agabus standardizes the text on the basis then of these other three families. Now, if that is true, can you see how that reduces the significance immediately of the Syrian manuscripts? The best we can hope for, if that is true, the best we can hope for in looking at the Syrian manuscripts is to do what? Discover something about the Western Alexandrian neutral. See? No direct connection between the Syrian and the original. And so with that, speculation. Now I say speculation because there is not one shred of historical evidence, not one hint from historical records that such a revision ever took place. All right? Not a hint of it. Not a hint of it. Now, again, I want to be careful here in arguing from silence. See? You argue from silence, there's no historical reference, so therefore, it didn't occur. And tomorrow it may show up, theoretically. So I don't want to be guilty here just of arguing from silence. But something of this magnitude, right, from an ecclesiastical standpoint, something of this magnitude, you would think somewhere along the line would have had some historical documentation. But Westcott and Hort here talk as though they have the minute book, all right? They talk as though they have the minute book of that commission. And here it is, not a shred of evidence. So it's a speculation. It's a speculation. Those of you that have had OTI, right? And we talk about the canon and the liberal notion of the canon that it was officially recognized in AD 90 at the Council of Jamnia, you see. Not a shred of evidence that Jamnia ever even addressed the issue of canon. But there's something that that is recognized as fact by the oft repetition of the statement, you see. And that Council of Jamnia has been talked into existence, you see. And so it is this commission, this revision. There's not a shred of evidence, historically, that any kind of recensional activity or revisional activity, I should say, took place in Antioch under Lucian, but theirs were the vast majority. And so with a stroke of the pen, as it were, the stroke of the pen in this theory, Westcott and Hort reduces the significance completely of those Syrian documents, neutral, Alexandrian, Western being then the principal witnesses to the original, and this being a revision of those three. Now, the theory, I say, has gone through some alterations, but essentially is the prevalent theory, I think, in most of what's going on today in seminaries and churches and right across the way. The terminology. B.F. Streeter, a name that you should be familiar with here as well. B.F. Streeter developed from this more what was identified as the local text. The local text theory. Essentially the same notion, but he changed some of the terminology. All right. Everybody recognized that what Westcott and Hort were calling neutral was a bit biased. All right. And so in Streeter's terminology, the term neutral was abandoned. The term neutral was abandoned. And the term Alexandrian now, whatever they included here becomes part of the neutral. And for the most part, the neutral text, if we can identify specific manuscripts, was identified, and I'm using now the siglum for the manuscript and not just our little, was B. You know what manuscript B is? Vaticanus. And Aleph. What was Aleph? Sinaiticus. All right. Two complete manuscripts, both of which date to about the 4th century. When these things came to light, it was, this is exciting stuff. Unseals, parchment. Complete, and they became infatuated really with manuscript B and Aleph. Now, others that they had put here under Alexandria, now Streeter comes and says, let's get rid of this neutral idea, all right? And so the Alexandrian family, using B, Aleph, and plus the others that were there, A, so forth, would now be within this category. Then the Western text actually now was divided between the Western, true Western, and then the Caesarean, what he called the Caesarean text. And what we call the Byzantine here, ultimately, or Syrian, he changed to Byzantine. All right, so, and that's, I think, the more common designation here. So with the genealogical method now, we typically will talk about the Alexandrian family, the Western family, the Caesarean family, and the Byzantine. And the Byzantine then being still reduced to insignificance, basically. Reduced to insignificance. Syrian text still viewed as the revision by what's his name, Lucian, and those of that Antiochian school. Question?
So you're saying the neutral and Vaticanus and Sinaiticus all got lumped into the Alexandrian?
They're part of the Alexandrian family now, yeah.
And when the Western was divided, the Caesarean came out of that.
Right, Caesarean. And particularly, the Caesarean is associated with the Gospel of Mark, particularly. Yeah. So more of a local, but the same idea. All right, so the genealogical method assumes that there are families of manuscripts. And most of them, all right, here's a point I want to make clear, that most of those then that hold to the genealogical method are going to put the primary emphasis or worth in the Alexandrian, all right? If you look at the text that is produced by the United Bible Society, the Nestle text, the Allen text, principally giving the principal focus, importance upon the Alexandrian, all right, upon the Alexandrian text, which is, again, still these two manuscripts being the principal representatives of the Alexandrian. Among the oldest of the manuscripts, all right? Among the oldest of the manuscripts. So here's that logical fallacy that we talked about earlier. Oldest of the manuscripts, so therefore, would not we expect the older reading to be manifest here? But they, for the most part, the genealogical method puts the primary credibility. Now, with the exception, to my knowledge right now anyway, in regard to English versions, virtually all of the English versions, with the exception of the New King James, and the King James, follows this particular textual theory. All right? Follows the basic conclusions that would result from the genealogical method that puts the primary focus on the Alexandrian manuscripts. Yes. Question?
I don't want to make you get ahead of yourself, but I have two questions. My first is, is dilution revision like a Hort thing, or would modern guys hold to that too? Would like a Bruce Metzger hold to dilution revision, or is that sort of like unique to Hort?
No. Hort, in Westcott and Hort, the question, I'm going to repeat the question in this case. Is the notion concerning the Syrian Byzantine being a revisional text still in vogue? Can I put it in those terms? Yes. Yes. The genealogical method is based, I say, upon that assumption and that speculation. But it's become a speculation, again, just like Jamnia, that is said so often that it has become true by the oft repetition of the statement. See? And it's just it becomes the speculation then becomes an assumption. But yeah, it's still a vital part of it. Because if I put this on the same level then, as an independent witness to the original text, then that gives it more weight, you see. Gives it more weight. But if I see this as just a revision, it reduces its significance, notwithstanding the fact that you have most of the manuscripts being there. Witnesses are to be weighed and not counted. And when you weigh these, they're not nearly as heavy as those two.
Yeah, I was thinking, I know they hold to that it's a conflicted text. I just wondered if they all hold that it's not an officially, like, church council conflated text.
Yeah, basically, this is viewed as ecclesiastical text, yeah. Yeah.
My other question, and this may get ahead of you, but the papyri. These guys, I think, say that the papyri somehow back up the Alexandrian thing. So what's going on in their minds? How does the papyri in their minds justify this? How does that factor?